Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaste. In this lecture, lecture number 10, the last lecture, at the cost of repetition, I would try to recapitulate some of the things before we move ahead. As we have been taking note, experience has become a complex category in the discursive trajectory that we have drawn for ourselves. We have also noted that experience was not entirely absent before we turned to what is known as post-positivism. We also noted that it assumed a partial significance in the scientific epistemology. It was a particular kind of experience that was configured in the philosophical meditations of René Descartes. If one can recall from the previous lectures, the Cartesian idea of experience, if one reads interpretatively, Cartesian idea of experience dismissed anything, any relation with sensations. Cartesian idea of experience is a realization achieved by a pure intellect, a pure I, which is as pure as God, divinity. Likewise, the wisdom capsules of Francis Bacon invoked a struggle against the phantoms of mind, idols of mind, which was very, very central in the classical sociological discussions on methodology, classical sociological interjections in the field of scientific epistemology, strengthened the framework of positivism, and that framework of positivism had certain kind of utopian vision of society in order to reconstruct society, and meanwhile that framework enabled the trinity, namely Karl Marx, Emile Durkheim, Max Weber, to fight against the phantoms of mind, to fight against camera obscura, to try to understand the structure, social structure, without falling prey to what they called distractions, intellectual distractions, impure thoughts. While some of those impure thoughts were recognized in the classificatory sense by Max Weber, we realize that even Max Weber eventually abides by the scientific epistemological proposition of verification. We realize that the first generation of social scientists were in critical engagement with the Enlightenment philosophy. They were in critical engagement with John Locke's empiricism and so forth. However, their intention was to create almost some kind of clone of science, and that clone in a very well rounded body appeared as positivism. The category of experience was not absent in the wake of what we considered as Newtonianism, whereby Isaac Newton, and more than Isaac Newton himself, the values attached with Newtonian scientific practice, that was very central in Newtonianism, and even there some version of a selective version of experience was available. It was never insignificant even for the forerunners of sociology who we discussed in one of the lectures, namely Montesquieu, Rousseau, the conservative thinkers, the romantics. The positivist sociology underlined that part of experience which could be free from prejudices. However, with the critical revisiting of science and powerful attack on scientism, science's belief in itself, with the advent of some kind of post-positivist leaf in social sciences in the aftermath of the debate between Karl Popper and Adorno, and then later, as we discussed in one of the lectures, the interjections made by historians and philosophers of science such as Thomas Kuhn, Paul Feyerabend, Imre Lakatos. In that kind of situation, we began to see that this is no longer experience of the kind that scientific epistemology propounded as the premise of relatively indubitable knowledge. It is not an experience of a detached observer about attached subjects alone. This is what we learnt in the previous lecture. It is accompanied with recognition that the detached observer is capable to be as attached as the subjects, and this was the main thrust of the call for reflexivity made by Alvin Goldner. It is accompanied with recognition that the detached observer is capable to be attached as the subjects, and moreover, it is a complex category of experience which appears to us with all kind of partisan values, with all kind of rivaling claims. Experience thereby becomes a turf of competing truth claims. It has intersections with some of the sociological categories such as class, caste and gender and so on and so forth, and it also shows us divide along socio-political lines, as we noted in the previous lecture. Colonizers and colonized both would figure in the realm of experiences in the post-positivist science. Experience of each kind would hold significance no matter how partial that experience, how partial is a truth claim within that experiential narrative. The historical encounters are never absent in the category of experience. This is what we learnt. The turf of experience thereby is thoroughly contested, and it is upon this contested turf that we tried to understand the significance of methodological monism, which Alvin Goldner persuaded us to take seriously. Along with Goldner, we also discussed the propositions made by C. Wright Mills, Robert Nisbet in the previous lecture. We learnt about the pervasiveness of the idea of crisis in social sciences. We realized that an anticipation of crisis happened with some of the pioneers of modern social sciences in India, namely Radhakamal Mukherjee and D.P. Mukherjee, among many others who were not discussed in the lecture, but they are there in the intellectual history, and these two were flagged in order to invite students to explore furthermore along this line. And it is in this wake that we become sensitive to the issue of located experiences, and we shall try to revisit the idea of reflexivity in order to settle the scores eventually, because located experiences, as it were, and as it was discussed in one of the previous lectures, located experiences also connote a sense of relativism. So, in what way a reflexive social science can help us overcome the duality of universalism and relativism? In what ways one can be sensitive to the local contextual realities and yet one can try to offer something which will be valid for universalistic social science. And it is in that direction this lecture, the last lecture in the whole set of lectures on this course, this last lecture would try to offer some kind of provisional resolve by primarily discussing the contribution of Pierre Bourdieu in this area. The impact of post-positivist turn on sociological methodology is most expressed in the discussions on reflexivity. There is little doubt about it. The idea of reflexivity has a trajectory spanning various domains of practices, arts, humanities and sciences. It presents to us an inventory with diverse meanings and usages of the term. There has been a daunting confession somewhere about the pluralism attached with the word reflexivity, and therefore it has been suggested that there could be infinite sayings about reflexivity and still reflexivity would not be captured. Reflexivity will exhaust us long before we exhaust it. This pithy remark about reflexivity is worth recalling, and therefore the discussion which will happen in this part of lecture does not aim at presenting an exegesis on the term and its various usages. This is wiser to have a selective discussion with a passing awareness of the length and breadth of the references and discussions on the term. The idea is not, the promise is not to give you whole and complete account of various kind of social scientific engagement with the word, with the term reflexivity. The idea is to get a sense as to how the reflexive turn in social science can take care of some of the intellectual apprehensions arising in the aftermath of post-positivism in social science. The idea of reflexivity seems to have acquired greater centrality in the post-positivist varieties of social sciences, in which agency, actor is predominant, not structure that was predominant earlier. Agency and actor become extremely important anchor for discussions in social science, with the force of reflexivity playing an important role. The allusion to reflexivity begins to appear in some of the post-positivist methodological positions, such as in sociology of knowledge, phenomenology and ethnomethodology, as we got to know in previous lectures, and also in post Karl Popper history and philosophy of science. The idea to be looking at one's own intellectual practices, the idea to be reflexive was very much there in Edmund Husserl's phenomenology as well as in Alfred Schu's phenomenology, in Garfinkel's ethnomethodology, and the development, the discursive development which happens after Karl Popper's thesis. Reflexivity also becomes a catchword in the debates on ethnography, famously known as writing culture debate in anthropology. In a response to post-colonial world fraught with fragments an array of anthropologists posed question to the ethnographic practices. And the question was, who attributes meanings, ethnographer or social actor? Who attributes meanings, I repeat, ethnographer or social actor? And in the same breath, one goes on framing new questions. Who writes culture, the people or the ethnographer? These are some of the very crucial questions which disclose the purpose of writing culture debate. The debate brought about a reflexive turn in ethnographic practices, casting aspersions on the ennobled notion of objectivity, making the very ennobled category of objectivity dubious. There was a reflexive turn in ethnographic practices. One began to see the making of ethnographic other, the subject of study which was ethnographic other. One begins to see that these ethnographic others are meticulously constructed by anthropologists, and this ethnographic other is equally meticulously distinguished from the self of an anthropologist. This is how it was in the conventional anthropological researches and the monographs emerging out of those researches. But then, furthering on the premise of reflexivity, there have been anxious exploration of epistemology, representational practices, and ethnography moving beyond the narrow focus on textual analysis. Writing culture debate sought to make the issue of representation as the central concern, and the debaters who participated in the debate downplayed the ethnographic other. They made us realize that this construction of ethnographic other is not worth it, because ethnographic other is in relation with the self of an ethnographer. In other words, the key question of the writing culture debate was, which was already flagged earlier, who attributes meaning, who writes culture. This question is further reframed in this debate as who all are represented and how much is the representation in an ethnographic work today. I repeat, who all are represented and how much is the representation in an ethnographic work today. Very briefly, I tried to show you that this particular variety of debate in anthropology also is premised upon the idea of reflexivity. More important, however, than exhausting a vast trajectory on reflexivity, in implication exhausting ourselves, as the pithy warning sounded earlier, there is a debate with eclectically chosen sources, and in this regard the attempt is to read Alvin Goldner and Pierre Bourdieu, the French sociologist, together. We had a discussion on Alvin Goldner's contribution, particularly to understand the trope of crisis that he was referring to. But here we will try to move ahead a little more. Perhaps any discussion on reflexive sociology has to start with Goldner's response to the coming crisis in Western sociology, which we touched upon in the previous lectures too. It was based on a critical realization that positivist sociology operated with disabling paradoxes. One of the paradoxes, disabling in nature, which was alluded earlier in the previous lecture as well, is about the split personality of social scientists, which I also, in order to be provocative, called intellectual schizophrenia. What is this split personality business according to Alvin Goldner? It is that one has to be one thing in professional life of a social scientist and quite another in everyday life. In other words, it is methodological dualism that splits a sociologist into two distinct parts. One possesses Olympian power, and by the virtue of that Olympian power, one can maintain order and structure in the pursuit of knowledge. And the other part is an ordinary mortal who can go berserk, who can encounter impediments which will seize his or her intellectual inquiry. But there is another paradox in Goldner's words. The another paradox in Goldner's words, and I quote here, is that those who supply the greatest resources for the institutional development of sociology are precisely those who most distort its quest for knowledge. Very provocative, isn't it? Those who supply the greatest sources for the institutional development of sociology are precisely those who most distort its quest for knowledge. The Machiavellian character of the sociologists shows in the judgments they make, even though they claim to be value neutral. This is paradox. This is the paradox Alvin Goldner is referring to. It summons us to do sociology of sociology, a radical kind of sociology. It means undertaking a reflexive exercise of critically unraveling what sociology does or what sociologists do, critically unraveling their methodological preferences and prejudices, their interactions and implications. Reflexivity makes it a radical sociology, which could allow sociologists to see themselves as a total man. In Alvin Goldner's word, a total man as a sociologist, or a sociologist as a total man, not a split personality. A total man who is not interested in performing intellectual schizophrenia, rather a total man who is a sociologist and who is interested in operating with the totality of his personality, the totality of his intellectual upbringing, training. This total man has to be at work before or simultaneously as they see the world at large. It is like looking into the mirror and developing a self-understanding before or while understanding the world. Evidently, Goldner expects reflexive sociologists to see themselves in relation with the rest of the world, including the people that the sociologists study. It demands us to recognize a deep kinship with those whom we study, and thus they shall be seen as brother sociologists. The ordinary folks should be seen as brother sociologists of the self-proclaimed extraordinary intellectual folks who are official sociologists. Those ordinary folks should not be seen as alien others or mere objects for our superior techniques and insights. In sum, reflexive sociology expects transformation of sociologists' way of seeing the other, a self-critical understanding of how and what one sees and on the whole a transformation of the sociologist's self and his praxis. Goldner concludes, and I quote, "The core of a reflexive sociology then is the attitude it fosters toward those parts of the social world closest to the sociologist, his own university, his own profession and its associations, his professional role, and importantly his students and himself, rather than toward only the remote parts of his social surrounding." A reflexive sociology is distinguished by its refusal to segregate the intimate or personal from the public and collective, or the everyday life from the occasion political act. It rejects the old style closed office politics no less than the old style public politics. A reflexive sociology is not a bundle of technical skills. It is not a bundle of technical skills. It is a conception of how to live and a total praxis. Reflexive sociology is not a bundle of technical skills. I repeat, it is a conception of how to live and a total praxis. This amplification of methodology for social scientists, connecting it with day-to-day life of social scientists, this is quite revolutionary in the history of social sciences. Methodology thereby is not a technical instrument, it is a matter of passionate engagement. However, this is not the only way of talking about reflexivity. There is another way which offers a great deal of possibility to resolve the intrigue of experience that we have encountered. It tries to resolve the dilemma that we have about structure and agency, about positivism and post-positivism, about objectivity and subjectivity. And this is Pierre Bourdieu's sociology. Vacant notes that Pierre Bourdieu anticipated the reflexive gestures in qualitatively different manner than that of Alvin Goldner. And as Bourdieu noted, I quote, "In Goldner, reflexivity remains more a programmatic slogan than a veritable program of work. What must be objectivized is not only the individual who does the research in her biographical idiosyncrasy, but the position he or she occupies in academic space and the biases implicated in the view she takes by virtue of, or he takes by virtue of being offsides or out of the game." It is in the same breath that we find Bourdieu expressing his anxiety. Bourdieu was wary of the anthropological turn to reflexivity, which was allegedly vulnerable to nihilistic relativism, which foreclosed the possibility of any kind of engagement across cultural contexts. A genuine reflexivity in social science shall stand guard against epistemocentrism or ethnocentrism, and by doing that it is taking care of the fear of relativism. It shall be characteristically, reflexivity according to Bourdieu, shall be characteristically anti-narcissistic, not individual centric, not centered on individual idiosyncrasies. It should be essentially anti-narcissistic. Reflexive sociology or sociology of sociology is not a prerogative of methodological specialist or narcissistic epistemologist or sociologists of knowledge or science. According to Bourdieu, it is instead a fundamental dimension of sociological epistemology. It is a necessary prerequisite of any rigorous sociological practice, in which it is possible to perform what Bourdieu calls participant objectivation. Participant objectivation. What does it mean? What does participant objectivation means? It means that every sociologist with whatever theoretical orientation and perspectives cannot objectivize the others unless one objectivizes one's own interest, motive and objective behind objectivizing others. So, participant objectivation means objectivizing others as well as simultaneously objectivizing one's own self. The self and other are brought closer in this whole process of participant objectivation. This was more firmly put in Bourdieu's reflection on Homo academicus, the famous work, where he tried telling us that sociology can be an extremely powerful instrument of self-understanding of one's own condition of production and of the position one occupies in the social world. Bourdieu's intellectual partner Vacant observes, looking at the intellectual and personal trajectory of Pierre Bourdieu, Vacant says that from his early investigations of marriage practices in the idolated village of Pyrenees mountains, where he was raised to hunt for Homo academicus gallicus, the tribe he joined as a result of his upward social climb, Bourdieu has continually turned the instruments of his science upon himself, if in a manner not always immediately perceptible to some of his readers. Bourdieu, in Vacant's suggestion, has subject himself to participant objectivation, has practiced reflexivity in such a manner that his self is as much a subject of analysis as is his subject of study. It is a brand of reflexivity that has three distinct features. First, it seeks to unravel social and intellectual unconscious embedded in analytical tools and operations. Second, rather than a lone intellectual adventure, reflexivity shall be discussed as a collective enterprise. Third, it shall provide with the epistemological security of sociology rather than assault the already insecure and vulnerable disciplinary practice. The third one is more important, and hence Bourdieu's reflexive sociology is not anti-objectivity. It does not join the familiar post-positivist criticism of objectivity. Instead, it seeks to increase the scope of objectivity in knowledge in social sciences. as part of the reflexive practices for a more nuanced notion of science and objectivity, Bourdieu critically unmasks the methodological fetishism, almost in the line adopted by C. Wright Mills elsewhere. This critique reveals the anti-theoretical or sophistication of methods and techniques devoid of theoretical insights. The methodological fetishism is being unmasked by showing that the relation between method and technique and theories, the relation between conceptual tools and field-based understanding, by showing the weak relation between these two sets of things, Bourdieu is trying to unmask methodological fetishism. He tries to show the flip side of methodological fetishism, and that flip side is methodological pluralism. In previous lecture, we got to understand methodological pluralism with reference to our discussion on Paul Feyerabend's thesis. Bourdieu pithily calls this methodological pluralism some kind of polytheism. Polytheism. Polytheism or methodological pluralism, which is there in Feyerabend's slogan, anything goes, or in epistemological anarchism or Dadaism that we discussed in earlier lecture. This flip side, methodological pluralism, is equally problematic for Bourdieu. Just like methodological fetishism is problematic, so is methodological fetishism. So is this anarchism, so is this pluralism, so is this polytheism. This all amounts to an intellectually disabling methodologism in sociology, and Bourdieu is uncomfortable with this whole preoccupation with methodology in such a way that it either takes you to fetishism of methodology or it takes you to methodological pluralism, which is actually some sort of anarchism. One shall be cautioned against it. In a reflexive sociology, one shall be cautioned against this kind of divisive preoccupation with methodology. Another tendency of equally objectionable kind is theoreticism. Theoreticism is a practice of meta-theorizing that is entirely disconnected from the empirical world. It is theoretist theory, it is theoretist's theory perpetuated in the self-enclosed, self-referential realms of discourses. A reflexive sociology can enable to grapple with such dominant tendencies and find a way forward and not get stuck with this kind of oppositions, this kind of intellectual fist fight which has happened in post-positivist social sciences. For Pierre Bourdieu, reflexive sociology envisages a total science of society, a total science of society which would be inclined to fathom total social facts, quote unquote. Total social facts. This total social facts is a reminder for all the students of social sciences in general and sociology and anthropology in particular of the relationship, the kinship that Emile Durkheim had with Marcel Mauss. This can be pursued by students on their own as to how the conceptual contribution of Emile Durkheim of social facts, and the conceptual contribution of Marcel Mauss on total fact comes together here in Bourdieu's proposition of total social facts. This is an anti-Cartesian conception. This is an anti-Cartesian conception. How? In this conception, various aspects of society, including the knower and the object of knowledge, are shown in intricate relation. The self and the other come together in this scheme. Reading selectively from phenomenologists and hermeneutists, from Husserl, Heidegger to Merleau-Ponty and Wittgenstein, among others, reading all of them, engaging with all of them, Bourdieu dwells upon the idea of ontological complicity. A lot of these phrases appear in Bourdieu's sociology, and one has to be careful in thrashing them out. What I am trying to do is to briefly explain some of these things so that it can be available for comprehension. What does ontological complicity mean? It means that there is a contact between subject and world. This is like ontological contact. This is like contact in the context. It is a contact with existence. This contact involves existentialist logic of some sort. Ontological complicity means that there is a contact between subject and world, actor and structure, agency and meaning, so and so forth. This ontological complicity is actually a fount of intersubjective meanings. Such an orientation enables Bourdieu to develop a stance of reflexivity, which furthermore can problematize two antinomies that plagues sociology in particular and social science in general. And what are these antinomies? These are the antinomies of social physics and social phenomenology. These are the antinomies of objectivity and subjectivity. In the same series of antinomies, it is possible to perceive the confrontation of positivist which would stress on methodological holism, and post-positivist which would stress on methodological individualism. Bourdieu persuades us to develop a way of seeing, a methodological perspective which can depart from methodological monism, according to which either positivist or post-positivist, either structuralist or phenomenologist can be of any utility. Instead, in Bourdieu's advocacy of total social science, there is an attempt to steer clear of the mechanical structuralism as well as teleological individualism. Mechanical structuralism puts agents on vacation, meaning the agency is not recognized there, and in teleological individualism, agent is declared as over socialized cultural dope. Instead, a total science of society seeks to see the social world through praxeology, weaving structuralist and constructivist approaches, weaving social physics and social phenomenology together. On an occasion, Bourdieu considered it to be a structuralist constructivism in dialectical relation with constructivist structuralism. Structuralist constructivism in dialectic with constructivist structuralism. This kind of phrases brought together is not just a wordsmith's job, is not just playing with words. With each of these phrases, Bourdieu is trying to make a reflexive social science where intrigue of very complex variety of experience can be taken care of. This is so because the social universe leads a double life. It leads a double life, and therefore there is this idea of double objectivity of society. Bourdieu plays with this idea of double objectivity of society, which is premised on the objectivity in subjectivity. It's premised on the possibility of seeing objectivity in subjectivity. So, what is this double objectivity of society? It suggests that the first existence of objectivity is in the objectivity of the first order. The objectivity of the first order constituted by the material resources including capital. That is the objectivity of the first order. And the second kind of objectivity is in the objectivity of the second order, which is constituted by a system of classification, a system of schemata, symbolic templates and practical activities such as conduct, thoughts, feelings and judgments. These two orders of objectivity, the double objectivity of society, is very dear to Pierre Bourdieu, and that also is arrived at because of the kind of reflexivity which Bourdieu would like to practice in his sociology. The neat duality of the universe actually invites a double reading, a double focus analytic lenses. These are the words of Pierre Bourdieu, a double focus analytic lenses. Sociologists are required to do total science of society with this double focus analytic lenses, which can enable them to understand the double objectivity of society. One reading takes recourse to social physics. One order of objectivity takes recourse to social physics, the positivist way of saying that prevails in structuralist pursuit of knowledge. However, it needs to utilize the epistemic virtue while dispelling vices of this reading by standing firm with the following conviction. And what is the conviction for this first order of objectivity? The conviction is social science cannot treat social facts as things, as did the Durkheimian percept. So, this is a course correction for the first order of objectivity, which is central to positivist framework of knowledge. This is because social facts are contingent upon society. Despite sociocentrism, Durkheim did not sufficiently unravel the relation between the categories of understanding in collective representation, underlying mental schemata and social structure. Durkheim and Moss both lacked in unearthing the causative mechanism behind social classification. Bourdieu uses the sociocentrism to show the homology of system of classification, categories of understanding, mental schemata and social structure. They are genetically linked and they constitute the durable and transposable dispositions internalized by the individuals, and hence the dialectic, as mentioned before, between objectivity of first order and second order, earlier formulated as constructivist structuralism and structuralist constructivism, that becomes very clear. Eyeing at the double objectivity, Bourdieu emphasizes that symbols are not only collective representations, but also instruments of domination. It amounts to suggesting that sociology of knowledge or of cultural forms is a political sociology. It is in last analysis a sociology of symbolic power. An individual can be within structural limits and yet can transform the world by transforming its representation. There emerges a primacy of relation in Bourdieu's reflexive way of seeing against any methodological monism, any bipolar views in which actors and structures are related through connecting concepts of habitus and field. This is the last part of my discussion on Bourdieu's contribution, in which these two very important categories surface for attention. Habitus, a disposition, tendency, propensity or inclination. Habitus is a way of being, a habitual state, or it is akin to the intention in action, as Searle suggested elsewhere. As an organized and organizing principle, structured and structuring disposition, habitus is the strategy generating principle enabling the agents to cope with unforeseen and ever changing situations. It is thus a system of lasting and transposable dispositions that bring together past experience, ongoing moments of perceptions, appreciations and actions as an integrated whole. Habitus therefore shall bear an iota of indefiniteness, inconclusiveness. On the other hand, a field is a replacement for society and consists of a set of objective historical relations between positions anchored in certain forms of power or capital. It is a patterned system of objective forces, much in the manner of a magnetic field. Bourdieu plays with physics here. Just like in magnetic field, a relational configuration endowed with a specific gravity which it imposes on all the objects and agents which enter in it. Enter in it means enter in the field. In the manner of a prism, a field refracts external forces according to its internal structure. Besides, a field is a space of conflict, competition and various stakes of authorities. While there are clear rule governing agents in the field, there is also adequate malleability, making a field a structure of probabilities. This is the phrase by Bourdieu. Field as a structure of probabilities. A field thus offers rewards, gains, profits or sanction with due amount of indeterminacy. With this kind of detailing coming from Bourdieu's sociology, one begins to understand the richness of the word reflexivity when it is employed as a practice in social sciences. The relation conceptualizes the conceptualization of field and habitus thus befits Bourdieu's reflexive sociology, in which not only self and other is debated, in which all sorts of binaries are debated, and also many other binaries slip under criticism of a very qualitatively different kind, the criticism which is not charged with the passion of very idiosyncratic variety of reflexivity that we witnessed in Alvin Gardner. With this version of reflexivity coming into our becoming an important signpost in our discussion, we understand that there is a possibility to deal with the intrigue of experience. We understand in this light that the kind of debate which was presented to us by, say for example, Gopal Guru and Sundar Sarukkai, the kind of debates which appeared from feminist standpoint theories, they take care of some of the intellectual anxiety which becomes central with the post-positivist turn in social sciences. This is where we end this set of 10 lectures. This is where we realize that the epistemological landscape, starting with the advent of modern science and with the advent of scientific epistemology, till now, where we discuss the category of reflexivity, that whole epistemological landscape is full of possibilities. Located in that epistemological landscape, we, the learners of philosophy of social science, who have engaged with epistemological issues, we are expected, after learning this, we are expected to indulge ourselves in exploring the possibilities of doing methodological innovations and not just follow certain kind of textbooks on method and technique and borrow the formulas and apply them in our research proposal and we consider our job done. Rather than taking that comfortable route, this whole set of lectures, these 10 lectures, invite us to undertake intellectual, participate in intellectual politics related to methodology, and then try to develop some kind of methodological insights, try to make certain kind of interjection in scientific epistemology, which is equally important in the pursuit of knowledge in social science. Thank you.